Welcome to Imaginary Lands, the works of award-winning author and storyteller Bobby Pell. Today's selection, Niamh and Oisin, an Irish love story, is a tale surrounding the lives of legendary hero Finn Mac Cumhaill and his warriors, the Fianna. When a fairy maiden is cursed, she seeks a cure from the realm of mortals, specifically the heart of a young Fianna poet, Oisin. Will true love win? Listen and find out.
Once upon a time, a very long time ago, there was a wonderful land of dreams called the land of Tir na Nog. Some people call it the land of Everfair. And in this land of Everfair there lived a king. He had one daughter. Her name was Niamh. Niamh was lovely, beyond compare. Now in this kingdom they had an unusual tradition. Every 7 years there would be a race to see who would be king. Now Niamh's father had won for many years, but he was becoming older, and as the new race approached, he went to his chief druid magician and asked him what he could do. The magician said, You needn't worry yourself at all right now. You'll win the race this time. But know that in 7 years' time, the next king will be the man who marries your daughter Niamh. Well, the king became angered at this, and his jealousy at this unknown suitor was just intolerable. He went to the druid the next morning and he said, You must cast a spell upon her. You must make her ugly. I can't have her marrying a man that will beat me out. You must help me. Well, the druid said, But, sir, I can't do such a thing. I've known her since she was a wee babe, held her in my arms. She is a lovely, beautiful creature. How can you be so selfish to even think of doing such a thing? Well, as it so happens, Niamh, who was of the marrying age at that time, wandered into the room, and before her father could say anything, he grabbed up the magician's wand and pointed it at her. He carefully spoke an incantation, and she started shrieking. For she started changing. At least, only her head, that is. For what had once been simply rosy cheeks now began turning into rough, reddened skin. Her long, blonde hair now began to fall out all around her until she had nothing left but grey stubble upon her head. Her nose began to get enlarged until it was that of a snout, while her ears became pointed. For poor Niamh, her head had been turned into that of a pig. Father, what have you done to me? And she ran, screaming from the court. She went back to her bedroom, sobbing. Later that day, the king's magician came to her. Niamh, darling, he said, you needn't be so worried. There is a way to counteract your father's harsh decree. You must marry one of the sons of Finn Mac Cumhaill, the great hero, he and his mighty warriors, the Fianna of Ireland. If you marry one of his sons, then your beauty shall be restored. That very night, under the cloak of darkness, Niamh leapt upon her white steed and rode out of the clouds over the 9th wave until she came to Ireland's shores. There she quietly inquired as to the location of Finn and his men. She crept among the shadows and the pine woods until she found them at last. She pulled her cloak up over her hideous head and waited. The next morning, Finn and his men had gone out hunting, but they had left one of his sons, Oisin the Gentle they called him, behind at the camp. for it was Oisin who had learned from the bards the ancient traditions of poetry, and it was his poetry that gave the warriors their renown, for he would write of their adventures. Yet he hadn't the heart for the hunt. When they returned that afternoon, much of their kill was to be prepared, though, by Oisin and carried by him. She noticed that the load was so heavy that she thought perhaps this would be her way to meet him. So Niamh, with the cloak pulled tightly up around her head, approached Oisin. Her voice, still remaining sweet, could be heard coming from the trees. "Might I help you with this load?" And without looking to see the speaker, he said, I would appreciate any help. Oh, gracious, but it's way too heavy for me to take by myself." And so the two carried the load of the hunt together. As night fell, she shared a simple meal with him, and they spoke of many things throughout the night, but she was careful to keep her face hidden from him. At first light the next morning, he asked her, But why do you stay so hidden from me? Your face must be as lovely as your voice. Please, let me see your eyes." And with that, she let the hood fall onto her shoulders, and there was nothing but the head of a pig. "Oh, my gracious," he said, You come to me as somewhat of a surprise. You must be under some type of spell or bewitchment." And she said, Yes, I am. I don't know what to do, but you might be able to help me, for I have been told that if I marry one of the sons of Finn, I perhaps will get my beauty back." "Why, I will marry you," he said. "I cannot imagine a woman having to endure such a thing." And that afternoon, under Finn's command, they were wed. She stayed with Finn and the Fianna for quite some time, and gradually the points in her ears turned back into gentle sloping arcs. Gradually the stubble on her head turned into long, beautiful golden locks. Her nose began to shrink back into that of a delicate nose befitting a princess. And one morning, when she turned to her husband, he now saw the sea-green eyes of his bride for the first time. Her beauty overwhelmed him. He noticed now that her long hair was bedecked with pearls and jewels, and she now told him her true identity. "I am the princess of the king of the land of Tir na Nog, and now you must ride with me upon my white steed over the 9th wave until we come to the land of Ever Fair. And there you can write poems to your heart's delight, my husband." And with that, he said farewell to his father Finn and to his friends of the Fianna. He jumped upon the steed, and they began to ride. They rode over the 9th wave, through the clouds, until finally they came to the land of Tir na Nog. Now Niamh did not know that her father had been so horribly upset with himself at the way he had reacted in such a rash, angry manner. She did not know how he had been ailing all these many months of her absence, wishing to set things aright. He was more than thrilled to see that the beauty of his daughter had been returned, and he welcomed them both into his kingdom. In fact, before the 7 years were up, he decided to go ahead and turn over the kingdom to his new son-in-law, to Oisin. And here Oisin wrote poem after poem about all that happened in this wonderful fairy land of the Shining Ones. But then he began to have dreams of the rolling hills of Ireland, of the great warriors of the Fianna, and the smile of his father. He spoke to Niamh of it one morning, and he said, "My dearest, as much as I love you, I miss my own country and family. Is there no way that I can go back for just a day to see them?" But she shook her head. "No, my darling, you have been here much longer than you ever dreamed." "But surely things in Ireland can't have changed that much," he said. "I've only been here about 3 years." No, my dearest, you've been here 300 years. But I tell you this, if it is in your heart to go back, then ride my steed, he will take you home. But know that you will find things quite changed. I also give you this warning. If you set foot upon the land of Ireland, you shall never return to me again. And with that, she left the room. And he found her steed, and Oisin began his journey back, through the clouds, over the ninth wave, back to the rolling green hills of Ireland. He came upon the shore and found that now there were houses where there had been none. And as he went through the countryside, he saw more and more changes. He asked the people about Finn and the Fianna, but they looked at him as if he was crazy. He went up to the hill of Allen, where the fort had been, and now all that remained were ruins. "I shall go to the High King. He shall tell me the truth." And as he set out on his journey to find the High King, he noticed that there were some men who were having trouble moving a large stone. "Why," thought Oisin, "I am brave and strong. I could move that stone with just one mighty jerk of my hand." And so he leaned down from his saddle, and he helped the men move the stone. But as he did, his weight broke the girth of the saddle, and the saddle slipped to the side, and Oisin fell to the ground with a thud. The strong, handsome young man began to transform right in front of their eyes. The men stood, crossing themselves with fear. As the hair grew grey, wrinkles appeared on his face. The tall, straight back began arching over in unnatural patterns. And suddenly before them stood a 300-year-old man. They picked him up and took him to a hut near the new mission. For now the land had a new saint, Saint Patrick, and they took this old man to him. St. Patrick listened to the stories of Tír na nÓg that Oisin shared with him on his deathbed. But soon it came that the body was too frail to live any longer. And as it gave up the ghost, Patrick was there with him. He wasn't sure what to do, for Oisin had believed in the old ways, not the new. And yet while he pondered this, he heard a tinkling of bells. And when Patrick opened the door, there outside the hut was a beautiful white horse with a fine golden saddle. He knew this to be the horse of Niamh, for he had heard the tale of this horse many times. And without thinking twice, he lifted the body of old Oisin and he laid it in the saddle across the back of this horse. When he did, Patrick took 3 steps backwards, and at the end of the 3rd step, he saw a wonder. The body began to change. It was as if the agedness of it were breaking off in ashes, and from it then rose the tall, straight, handsome form of Oisin, as he had been when he'd first arrived in Ireland again after his time in Tír na nÓg. He looked at St. Patrick and simply nodded his head in appreciation. But knowing better than to speak again, he simply began riding. And he rode hard until he came to the shores. And when he got to the shores, he began riding into the water, and then over the waters, and over the 9th wave, back to his beloved Niamh, and back to the land of Tír na